probably more difficult for Joe to talk about the war in Vietnam than the rest of them say in World War II, because World War II was a popular war, but the war in Vietnam was not popular, and it made it difficult for the soldiers to come home and be recognized and replant themselves in their lives and among their families. So thank you, Joe. These two young men, and they are both young men, because I know what an old man looks like. But thank you, gentlemen, and I'm going to move on to another young man, Teddy Novakowski. We will get him back to World War II now.
Mind if I stand, Bob? I can't.
Sure.
Well, first, when I was 18 years old, I tried to join the Air Force. Passed everything except this color blindness test. They call it color dome. I can see red and green together, but you put them together and they call it color dumbness. So as a result, when I was 18 years and 3 months, I was drafted. Well, wouldn't you know, you hear about these guys going to Fort Devens. Everybody goes to the Navy. Everybody, and then another day they go to the Army. I had a chance to go to the Marines, the Navy, the Coast Guard, but my eyes knocked me out. I have 30/30 vision, even with the glasses. And the VA doctor down in Worcester says, you ought to be shot because I have such good eyesight. But I'll give you a quick rundown of my travels. I went in on St. Patrick's Day in '44 and a little over 18 years old. Sent to Camp Croft for 17 weeks, came home for a furlough, 30 days. Then I went back to Fort Jackson where I joined the 87th Division, which is the, they call it the Acorn, Golden Acorn, but us guys, we call it the Golden Peanut. And so we trained there, and there I qualified for machine gun, and that was my duty. Then we traveled to, early in October, we traveled to Camp Kilman, New Jersey, and 2 days later we donned the ship. We thought it was a banana boat. Well, would you know, it's the biggest ship in the world, the Queen Elizabeth. But it was dirty because they couldn't clean it. It was moving back and forth. We left Camp Kilburn in the morning, and we got out in the ocean. She zigzagged all the way across. She traveled all alone because there's no ship that could keep up with her. And we get out there maybe 2 days, and someone hollered, submarine. Well, we lived down at the bottom of the ship, the garage. We had to travel 2 sets of iron stairs. Well, you want to see 200 guys trying to get out of that hole. Then they discovered it was porpoises. As fast as we were traveling, those porpoises would come right up the side and go like that. And also we noticed that right in front of the ship, there was a stream of water about 60, 70 feet high that was always there because of the shape underneath. We traveled across, no problems. Oh, yeah, we had a problem. Everybody wanted a seat upstairs. Well, after the first day, everybody went back down because these guys kept getting seasick, and they got over the rail and everything come back at them. And one thrilling sight we saw when we got up near Ireland, the sea turned green. We couldn't believe it, you know, from the Atlantic blue. And so we went around Ireland and we went up to Scotland. And Scotland, we had to anchor out and go get off with LCIs, and because they couldn't go up to the dock. And then we traveled by train. You know, where you're seeing these Murder on the Orient, these cars, they have a walkway down one side and these compartments. Well, they put 6 of us in one of those compartments, and with our big duffel bags. And we were stunned. We couldn't move. So then we got down into Oxford, England. It was between London and Liverpool, and it was dark and it was foggy. And we had a big joke on this thing. We got out of the train, out of the cars, we lined up, and then they said, okay, it was foggy. Oh, it was foggy. Hang on to the guy in front of you, you know, in your squad. Don't let go, don't let go. Well, you know what happened? We got down there a ways and someone let go. Well, fortunately, I was at a good group, and we got to this big estate, and we slept in we stayed in the stableman's quarters, or the maintenance guy called, so it was all right. But we stayed there about, this was where General Patton's headquarters were. And so then after that, we left Knutsford by train, and we went to Southampton, and we got a boat, a small boat, we had about 400 or so in there, across the English Channel. And we got to Le Havre. When you got to Le Havre, you could not see a single building, whole building. They were all wrecked, by shelling. And then we went by truck and train to Metz. Now Metz is in northern France, right up about 10 miles from Germany. And so we stayed there for a day, no tents, no buildings. And then we moved out, and would you know that we relieved the 26th Division, which is the Yankee division from New England. They were at Fort Jackson, where we were. They left before us. And they were terrible. They had a lot of wounded, a lot of killed, so they were glad to see us. But I entered combat on December 11th. That's 11. I earned the Silver Star on the 16th. I got trench foot the 19th. And I got wounded in frostbite on the 22nd. So it was 11 days. So they lost money on me. Well, my buddy George, he got me out of there, and then we met a ranger in the woods, and he helped us out. And from then on, I went back to England through a series of hospitals. But we were in the Saar Valley, and we were three sides. We were surrounded by the 67th Panzer Division, which was an SS group. And the only reason they couldn't close us off, we had 6 or 7 big Sherman tanks that would fire 5 or 6 rounds, and then they'd move back and forth, because they had a spotter up in the hills. And of course, this was alpine country, hilly country. And but the next day, my outfit was moved from the Saar all the way around the top of the Battle of the Bulge. Now, I don't know how true this is, but they tell me that a patrol from my division closed the gap with the British patrols. But there was a lot of mud and it was cold. And the Army, the Korean, they developed a boot for Korea, but the Army, they had a leather boot with a leather top, and those suckers were cold. Oh, and that's the reason we got trench foot. One of the humorous things we had was, I was a machine gunner. I had an assistant machine gunner. He carried a tripod. Then I had 3 ammunition bearers. There was Barger and Miller, and the other guy, he was from Worcester. But we're coming down the second day we were in combat, and we saw this little brook. And it was probably about 3 to 4 feet wide. Well, if you ever train, you know if you got something heavy, you throw it out ahead of you, and that thing would just pull you right over. So I went over, Ed went over, and Barger, and old Miller comes up. He stood at the little stream, and then he tried to step over, and he wound up here. So he had to go back and change his clothes, wherever that was. But now I got hit, and I went to England, and I remember I got on the seat. It was in Paris, and I was on a stretcher laid out, and so I saw the Arc de Triomphe, just laying there looking like that. But then when I got on the plane, the nurse says, "Hey soldier, would you like to have a window seat?" I said, "Sure." I said, "I want to see the White Cliffs of Dover." Never saw her. I fell asleep. But then when the war ended, then I got recovered some. I spent, out of the 20 months in the service, I spent 6 months in hospital. Now that may sound, bad, but I wasn't suffering too much. But after the war, I went back from the hospital. It took me a month to get from Le Havre to about 20 miles from Czechoslovakia. We got into Czechoslovakia, and the war ended, and we had to move out because the Russians were coming. And so we didn't know what to expect. So they came and they greeted us, and they're dirty. Oh. They had rags for clothes. And one of the things in the key rations, we get a little chocolate, and then you get a full pack of cigarettes, 4 cigarettes in the little thing. And one of the guys tried to hand the Russian Chelsea cigarettes. They don't make them anymore. And he looked at it, he says, nix Chelsea, Lucky Stroop. And the other request they had, we had dry bread and lard. They used to get these big chunks of bread and smear lard on them. And supposedly that gave them energy. Yeah. And of course we went back and forth across France with those 40 and 8 boxcars, 40 men or 8 horses. You get up in the morning, and the first day you get on is all right, the second day, and these guys would sit on the door. You know, there's a little step on the outside. Well, about the third day, some German went and took a shot, and it had its rim, the door is rimmed with iron, and it hit the iron piece right near one guy was standing. You couldn't sell that seat after that. And I was in the hospital, and with 2 other guys. One was a lieutenant, he was bad off. He passed away while I was there. The other guy was, they called him Tague, T-E-A-G-U-E. He was from Texas, Tiger Tague, and he was a U.S. Senator later on. And he had his ankle was shot out. And years after, when he got into politics, and Joe Scherer, you know Joe, he was the commander of the VFW. He and I grew up together. He was the one that got me in the post office. I said, Joe, you go down to Washington, see Senator Tague, see if he remembers me. And Joe went down, he says, oh yeah, he remembers. He says, the Polish kid with all the casts on, because I had 2 casts here and 1 around my neck. And he remembers me very well. He said, tell him to come down. He says, I'll treat him to a good time. But we took, my division took about 13,000 German prisoners. Where they come from? There were 6 guys on a road, 2 machine guns, and all these guys, Germans coming, And you had to put the officers on one side and the enlisted men on the other side. Now we were a weapons squad, and then the riflemen would come down and take the prisoners and march them up to the enclosure where they kept them all. And but Czechoslovakia was nice. There was very little war damage. The last one I seen with Germany was in Plauen. But I got back there for 10 days before the war ended, and I was a machine gunner, and I had to go on patrol, and about the 3rd or 4th day, there was 4 Jeeps going around, and someone fired a shot at the 2nd one, Well, there's a lot of excitement there. And we come back to, after 30 days, we come back to France. So we were at either Camp Lucky Strike or Camp Oklahoma, I can't remember which. But we decided to go to PX with the engineers there to clean this whole big area. And the PX was down the end, so we were walking and, kidding around. And I says, hey, there's a guy from my hometown. They said, get out of here. They give me the business and everything. You know how soldiers are. He says, who is it? I says, Reggie Boone. Reggie's still alive today. You see him walking up and down West Street, not lately. And so I said, what? So I went and walked up and I said, hey, Reggie. Because I didn't play football. My mother wouldn't let me play football, but she let me play ice hockey. But I know Reggie and Roger Casavant and those guys. And so we had a little reunion there. And there was another fella over on Union Street. I can't remember his name. And Anthony Radecki. He come up at James Street up near where I live, but he's gone now. But they were so surprised, they didn't believe. So when we come back, we get on the USS America. That was a West Point. It was the biggest American ship. And it was nice and clean. We also had 32 Japanese, politicians that were captured in Berlin. So the United States got them, and they were going to use them to redeem General Wainwright, the Japs out there. But then when I got home, I was on furlough, then it wore into the east. And as we coming, that was a nice eventful trip. Nobody got sick, We're coming in the New York Harbor, and there's this big ship, the Queen Mary come by. And they blasted the horn and everything. So then I went home for 32 days, and Then I had to go back to Fort Benning, Georgia, and I was there 2 days and took a turn for the worse, so I had to go back in the hospital. And I stayed there till the 13th of October, when they decided, well, we can't use you anymore, go home.
I bet your wife decided that.
No, I didn't know that. Many of you know I like to fish. Now, I don't know where I got the fever, but when we were in Godesberg, there's this nice valley, you know, and there's this little brook running little river. It wasn't really, it was between a brook and the river. And they had these wooden bridges where the fireman wagon used to go over, so the guys used to go upriver, pull the pin on a hand grenade, drop it down, and the rest of us are down below and pull up the fish. We had a lot of good and, there's one thing that I can't remember. I cannot remember going from Cirencester to London or from London to Southampton. It's just completely blank. But while I was in London for a week, I want to say thank you to the Red Cross. They put me up for a whole week. 2 meals a day or 3 meals a day. You try and pay them, nothing doing. It's if you're serving your country. And this all come about where, well, many years back they complained the Salvation Army gave you free coffee and donuts, but the Red Cross charged you. What'd they charge you, 15 cents? So my support is with the Red Cross. And while I was in London, oh, the fog, you're just walking like you're walking into a pillow. But the one thing I remember, I was up with my buddies walking, we heard this noise. It sounded like these lawnmowers today. And what it was a buzz bomb. You know, the Germans set them off, and when the engine cut, then they'd drop like a stone. And they're probably about 3 or 4 miles away from us, and when it did, boy, that whole ground would shake like that. So thank you very much for coming.